This week is something a lot of people have been waiting for a long time, the finale of Subaru, Emilia, and Reinhard vs. Regulus. We cut back to Emilia, who is racing across the city to get to the wives, and when she gets there, they all remain motionless, because that is what Regulus told them to do. 184 asks what happened to their husband, and of course, Emilia can only say that they're still working on it, causing 184 to laugh on accident. Emilia says that she was never taught to bottle things up, as a burning sensation was building up in her heart. It was unbearably, intolerably, painfully hot. Even if they didn't want to be saved, she wanted to save them. Even if they called her a witch for trying. She tells them that they will defeat Regulus and she wants their help. Emilia doesn't want to lose to him. If she doesn't win, Regulus won't hesitate to take away something precious to her. And 184 breaks the silence. What's so precious? Your life? Does Emilia believe that as long as she is alive, something might come of it? All there is life. And this is their own form of fighting. Everything was stolen from them. If the one remaining thing, their lives, is stolen, everything will be his. Arc 5 is a great follow-up to Arc 4. Keep in mind how Emilia's character arc is all about fighting for her own independence in the world, not being used by those with more experience than her, and coming to terms with her identity. The wives are in a very extreme spot akin to this. It's something Emilia can understand all too well. Puck, Rosbal, and Subaru, all at some points, all dictated how she could act and what she should do, but she can no longer allow this. Emilia will be Emilia, just Emilia, so she asks for 184's real name. She tells her she's a half-elf, and remarks how every person is different. Their environments, where they're from, and their ages. Everyone is different. Being different tormented Emilia for a very long time. She thought nobody could understand her, that being hurt was normal. She bottled it all up, and no longer will she live like that, and she will continue forward being proud of being special. So she introduces herself. Her name is Emilia, a half-elf who is different in a lot of ways, but surely has some similarities too. A person who wants to save you. She thinks back to when a boy who she knew nothing about had acknowledged her existence. Natsuki Subaru had been special to her from that moment on, and 184's voice trembles. Why must she try to make them human again after everything that's happened? She was fine being a doll, and she asks Emilia what she knows about them, and she responds that she knows they're kind. She knows that she's really earnest. She knows that she's crying out for someone to help her. Their hopes had been dashed so many times before. Hope became a seed of despair that would only grow into a flower of death if it were nourished. Emilia says that she will do whatever she can to save them, but she needs their help. And so does her knight, and so does the Sword Saint. 184 turns and asks if there is anyone who likes that man, and so commences the absolute roast of Regulus at his own wedding. And then she gives up her name. Sophie. It was her mother's name, and her mother's name as well. And so, Sophie added her name to the divorce papers with a smile. We see the wives and Emilia considering just what that power could be, and a flash of realization strikes Emilia, as she tells the spirits in the church to enter the bodies of women. Listening to the sound of their heartbeats, she confirms her suspicion. The spirits check their mana flow, and the heart seemed strange. There is an entirely different pulse intertwined with Sophie's heartbeat. Regulus's heart has been merged with theirs. We cut back to Subaru, and unfortunately this entire section was basically cut to pieces. Subaru had been stalling to death for 10 minutes, and Perstella's 3rd district was entirely destroyed. He was taking advantage of Regulus wanting to see Subaru die, an expression of his twisted need for recognition, watching them break before his eyes. He thinks about how all the people who fell to Regulus died because they were brave, and how they should have been weak and frail and focused on running like cowards the whole time. An attack seemingly strikes Subaru, and we see him near defeat. Regulus taunts the injured Subaru, and Subaru tells him he knows that his power is related to the wives, to which Regulus calls him cunning. He has entrusted his most precious heart to his wives. Their rights are equal, and his love for them is equal, and the responsibilities they bear are divided among them fairly. That is the bare minimum requirement for a man who takes multiple wives, is it not? He is not a greedy man. He does not possess the sort of meaningless wealth that rubes like Subaru get so obsessed over. So what he gives his wives is his very self, the ultimate expression of love. And Subaru realizes that to stop Regulus, the hearts of the wives have to stop beating. We get some good stuff of Subaru dodging Regulus' attacks, after revealing that he was simply faking the injury to get him to talk, before we cut back to the church. Sophie was crushed by the realization that her heart was being used, and grabs a glass shard to immediately attempt to end her own life. Emilia stops her, but is told that there's no magical solution to this. Emilia can't help but be distraught over it. Why did she leave the Force to begin with if she can't save these people? Another victim? Another person who couldn't be saved because of her ignorance and lack of strength, and she thinks of Fortuna and Juice. People around her were giving up their lives in order to make up for her shortcomings. Sophie cuts herself with the glass, citing Regulus's belief that a woman with a scar is unworthy, so this cut is proof for freedom, and she is sure that upon her death, her heart would transfer to another wife, as all the wives agree that their deaths won't be in vain if it causes Regulus pain. They sharpen shards of their own, ready to take their own lives, and Emilia stops all of them. She thought really hard and came to this conclusion. She will stop their hearts. She won't make them cut their own throats, and then the church is frozen. Subaru was certain that Emilia wouldn't be able to kill the wives, but he was wrong. This was her answer, and Regulus looks on in horror as the entire church is frozen solid. He begins to lash out at Subaru, asking how he could even call himself a human, to steal away what another man loves without restraint. Is he satisfied with what he's done? Then Regulus suddenly goes flying as more and more missiles of ice slam into his body with deadly force. Freezing over the city road covered in water, Emilia says, "Consider that the divorce paper from your wives," her eyes filled with a cold animosity and a powerful resolve. Subaru apologizes for making Emilia shoulder something so terrible, but Regulus should now be vulnerable, and right when he thinks that, Emilia stops him, and Regulus breaks out of the frozen canal. His lion heart was still in effect, and he asks Emilia how she plans on taking responsibility for what she has done, and how absurd the idea is that it's all his fault that she killed them. And it really loops back to Regulus always twisting the narrative. Remember when the fight first started, when he put up his hand to his wives threatening to kill them, and blamed Reinhard and Subaru for it? Emilia, however, knows. There were 53 people. She would have never miscounted the amount of women he was imprisoning, and she knows she got all of them. Therefore, there is simply one heart remaining, and she tells Subaru that the final heart is inside of her. Regulus bursts into laughter, saying that they're truly at a dead end, and now Emilia has the responsibility to fill the gap until he finds a new wife, or if they want to test it, they can kill Emilia right here and learn his limits. Something even Emilia has the resolve to do, but Subaru refuses, and Regulus notes something. "Hey, you were the guy on the broadcast, right?" How pitiful. Thinking that just because you killed that good-for-nothing meant you could somehow defeat me. He was a worthless dullard before he was an archbishop, and never achieved anything of note after becoming one either. In the novels, Subaru isn't sure why, because despite hating Betelgeuse to his core, he felt a visceral displeasure at hearing Regulus mock and ridicule him like that, and that's when it hit him. Is something like that even possible? He asked Emilia if she can trust him, and with no hesitation, she says yes. She always believed he would be able to do something. He thinks about how unfair it is to have that much faith placed in him by the girl he loved, and there was no way he could afford to screw up now. Subaru focuses on the power deep in his heart, so dark it didn't feel like his own. For just this one time, he will call it by its old name. Just this once, so that villain with zero sense of camaraderie would understand. So we can know that this power was something he had inherited from his hated enemy, as Subaru calls forth the unseen hand. The novel described the feeling of using the power as a swirl of emotions, a cheer at being awakened, a joy at gaining power, and a deep desire to be wanted, to be called to service again. It was as if the witch factor itself was rejoicing, and upon hearing the name, Regulus stiffened in shock, frantically looking for the hands he could not see. While Regulus was distracted, Subaru reached the hand towards Emilia's beating heart, and her eyes widened slightly, as if meeting someone she had not expected to see, and smiled, remarking that's where Juice was. She trusts both of them, and he grips the invisible, all-too-small lion's heart, crushing the parasitic organ inside of her. Subaru was assailed by a pain that felt like his internal organs were being twisted tight, and Regulus asks what the hell just happened. Have you not noticed it? Your feet are wet. Now, it's pretty interesting that despite never really seeing or knowing Betelgeuse use the unseen hand, it's a sensation that Emilia immediately recognized as Juice's presence. Perhaps there's more to that, I don't know. But I also want to talk about the great spin on authorities here. Throughout ReZero, we see authorities be exceptionally cruel powers, like requiring death as an activator, or the unseen hand or lion's heart causing untold pain and misery, so it's almost as if Subaru is recontextualizing his authorities. Sure, return by death can be seen as a cruel power, and that would be fair, but post-Arc 4, Subaru is turning it into a power he does not want to rely on, and he will only use it if he really has to protect those he loves. And now he's doing something similar with Invisible Providence, or the Unseen Hand, a power that once existed to cause harm, and a power that Subaru even used in that way a couple of times now being used to save someone rather than hurt someone, something Subaru has to think about while trying to save Emilia from the heart here, wondering if these powers can do good after all. Emilia moves in quickly, beating Regulus's ass the hardest he has ever been beaten. He puts his hand up to his face in shock, blood trickling down his nose, and his face turned crimson as he erupted in anger. Emilia proceeds to deliver 53 hits, one per wife killed, and he is somehow still alive, and Subaru then realizes Regulus can invoke Lionheart with his heart inside of him. It just causes his heart to stop beating. Invincibility with a time limit. Regulus begins to yell about how unfair a 2v1 is, and Subaru agrees. He can have his 1v1, as Reinhard von Estrella re-enters the battlefield like a meteor crashing down to the earth. Regulus made one mistake. He shouldn't have thrown Reinhard towards the moon. He gives his name and title, and Regulus literally whimpers before being knocked straight into the sky. We get a great speech from Regulus that was unfortunately chopped to bits. Why is he being persecuted like this? He's not wrong. He's not wrong. He's not. He didn't do anything wrong, and now they're laughing at him. His first wife didn't laugh at him. He killed her family and anyone that dared look at her. She didn't smile no matter what, just a beautiful face. The same face since they were young. But why did she sneer at the very last moment? Don't you dare smirk. Don't look at me. Don't say my name. Don't talk about me. I don't care what you're saying. Just stop it. Don't focus on me. I'm complete and self-contained. We can't possibly understand each other. People are alone from the day they're born and the day they die. The idea of understanding one another is just an illusion. He's not wrong. He's not wrong. He's not. We really see the mask come off of Regulus as he's at death's door. It's the first time in maybe 100 or more years since he's been put in a situation like this, and his crave for validation comes out in full force. He thinks about how his first wife didn't laugh, the anger he feels when they mock him, when they smirk at him, because his first wife took her own life with a smile. It's this insane shell he builds around himself because of those feelings that leads to him repeating he's not wrong, he can't be wrong, because if he's wrong, everything falls apart. Regulus spent all this time, probably, trying to recreate his first wife. That's why they all look the same. That's why they aren't allowed to smile, lest they remind him of her final moments, and according to the author Tape, his first wife is the only one he made a grave for. Regulus is just a very sad man. However, a bit of his characterization is also locked behind cut content that we'll get to later. Regulus was a very important antagonist for all three of our fighters here. For Reinhard, it was fighting the worst interpretation of the strongest, fighting an aspect of himself that invoked fear in others. For Emilia, it was battling all the aspects of people that controlled her over the years, Puck's horrible teachings and a fairly misogynistic view of things, Roswell and his extremely controlling and preordained attitude towards her, and even Subaru's old issues of granting her her own autonomy. Standing up to Regulus here is her removing all that baggage from the past, including by freezing the wives, an action that froze her entire homeland, but here she uses it to save the day and even saves them by the end of it. And for Subaru, well, I've spoken about it in nearly every episode video, so it's no surprise, but like Reinhard, Regulus is a very twisted version of Subaru's old character flaws. His lack of accountability, just like Arc 3, his attempts to control or strip Emilia of her own autonomy in Arcs 3 and 4, his outdated and misogynistic worldview pre-Arc 3, his frightening power that almost guarantees he wins, it all adds up to a perfect foil for Subaru to overcome how he used to be. Going back to the episode, Regulus is trying to use Lionheart to not get killed by the attacks, but he can only maintain it for 5 seconds, and with Lionheart active, he could ignore all the rules of the world if he wanted to. I feel there's a pretty cool comparison to be made here between Subaru's return by death and Regulus, but I've spoken enough. Regulus's body slips into the ground, but he realized he had no way of slowing his descent, and he would keep falling forever. His heart reached its limit, and the anime obviously didn't go all in on the gore here, though it didn't do too bad of a job, so I'll recount what happened in the novels. When Regulus turned off Lionheart, every bone in his body shattered, and blood and tears flowed from his crushed eyes. His organs were all damaged, his hair was marred with blood and mud, and his crushed lower body was stained by urine and feces. He dug barehanded through the ground, and in 5-second intervals, all the pain would leave his body, then the living hell would return. He was certain they were patting themselves on the back for having defeated him, and he wouldn't allow it. He took pleasure in imagining them pleading for their lives once they got back up there, and showing them how it was when he got serious, and then he remembers Emilia. And now that he has comprehended her sins, they're worthy of killing. In the novels, he thinks about how dry his throat is, and how he hasn't eaten or drank in over 100 years, as water trickles from overhead. Even with his teeth gone, his tongue shredded, and blood flowing from cuts that covered the inside of his mouth, he could appreciate just how delicious the water was. The water flowed in, and didn't stop, sinking into muddy water. Every 5 seconds, he would return to drowning in pain. He opened his mouth, water and mud flowing in, filling his lungs and body as he shouted. He raised a voiceless scream. It was not a name. He didn't have anyone's name to scream with his dying breath. There was no response, because no one was at his side. He was alone in his final moment. He didn't want anyone to ridicule him after he was gone. He didn't want Emilia to merely celebrate getting revenge for her mother or Betelgeuse. He was sick just imagining her joyous dance at his death. She would surely act like she had just achieved some great life goal, as if her life could be set in motion by Regulus' death, as if she could shine now. Cue the end of Regulus Corneas. The powerful force of nature that took women to his cave and lured adventurers in has finally fallen. And I have to ask, what did you think of Regulus as an antagonist? Let me know in the comments below. We cut back to Subaru and Emilia as Subaru tells Emilia she doesn't look too relieved, and Emilia thinks about how he seems too familiar, as if she's met him before. And ironically enough, this happened at the same moment as Regulus screaming out far below ground. His final wish that couldn't reach the people standing above ground, that Regulus Corneas did not leave a single mark on Emilia, came true. We also get to see a nice scene of Emilia unfreezing the wives, as Subaru calls her amazing for stopping their hearts and saving them. Now, I have my complaints about the adaptation, but I have to say, this episode was pretty good, and probably top 3 or 2 of the season. The Invisible Providence scene is by far the best scene of the powers use in the entire show. Fantastic impact frames, fantastic drawings all around, with some very meaningful direction that moved me. I was not really impressed by Emilia hitting Regulus 53 times, which is unfortunate, because it was something I was looking forward to. It was executed in probably the least interesting way I could imagine. The Reinhard return scene also wasn't that exciting, looked way cooler in my head. However, I really liked the title card, with Regulus' name fading into the background, barely legible, just like the impression he leaves on people. Fantastic decision, and this episode had a lot of instances of direction I liked, the shot of Regulus flying around in the air giving his speech being a notable one. Subaru's speech in Arc 5 being a zoomed-out expression of Subaru's desire to save everyone by working with everyone, and a close-up claustrophobic view of Regulus' lack of accountability and wish to save himself. For the cut content, well, Subaru parkour dreams are officially dead, as this episode would have been the last chance for it. There is an entire section yet again of Subaru fleeing from Regulus that is yet again cut from the anime, continually decreasing the amount of cool things Subaru gets to do with the anime. This time, however, it wasn't just Subaru. The episode opens up with Emilia running over to the church, but in the novels, there was a much greater sense of urgency, and she's making ice structures around buildings, ramps, etc., and moving around the city as fast as she can. White Fox hates parkour, I guess. There's also a really big section right around when Subaru pretends to be injured, where he uses the ice spirit Emilia gave him to drop a giant block of ice on Regulus, and after he breaks out, Regulus recklessly charges at Subaru. This was, however, a part of his plan, and Subaru remarks how Regulus cannot stop the time of open air, which means that Regulus can just fall into holes like a Looney Tunes cartoon. Subaru had the ice spirit dig out holes all over the district so that Regulus can continually fall into them, and Subaru can buy even more time. Another unfortunate Subaru L for the adaptation. There's a little bit where the wives are unsure if Regulus' power is really linked to them in some way, and they ask if Subaru knows what he was talking about, and Emilia remains firm in her evaluation. The narration remarks how she doesn't follow him blindly and that she knows Subaru can be wrong, but a part of helping him shoulder the burden is to trust him when he says things, so if he is wrong, they can figure out things together. Just a nice scene that further ties together Emilia's character arc post-Arc 4. Now, Regulus' rant while flying around in the air was significantly longer than novels. In fact, around 75% of it was cut entirely. I won't bog you down with all the details. You can read the Regulus name chapter if you want every single thing he talks about, and I recommend doing that because it's a good read, but Regulus did in fact lose an entire backstory that will probably give you guys some more to chew on for his character. While Regulus is thinking about how if he got serious, he would annihilate them in the blink of an eye, he also thinks about his home life. His father drowned himself in alcohol and never earned a proper income. His mother's only talent was griping day in and day out. His brothers were always after what was his, and he describes the time he got his power and how he killed every single one of them. And then, he killed everyone in the village who looked at him in contempt. Then, he killed everyone in the town who had forced him to live in such a pathetic home in such a worthless village. Then, he destroyed the country whose incompetent stewardship had left towns and villages like that unaddressed. He thought himself to be content after that. He needed nothing, yet they forced things upon him, as if he were some poor, pitiful creature who looked lacking. His dad occasionally brought him a present. His mother apologized for troubling him, as if it made it acceptable. His brothers would share their food. Enough of the bullshit, he thinks. Treating me kindly only when it suits you. I won't go into what I think the family life thing means to him, so I'll let you guys speculate in the comments below. There is more cut from this little speech of his, but that should suffice. Finally, and this is a very, very big one, it can be re-added later, but I'm not sure why it would be. It should have been here. First, after Reinhard leaves, Subaru almost starts to compare himself to the amazing people around him, but he stops and thinks, no need to compare myself to other people. Relying on what other people think like that is just a path to becoming the same as Regulus. And he was the sort of guy who couldn't be sure of where he stood without looking down at the ground below him. He was a good example of what not to be. We also get his first explicit thought about return by death since the start of the arc. He thinks that if someone did lose here in Pristella, he would not hesitate to reset. If there was a chance of saving anyone, he would do it without a second thought. Then Emilia sits next to him, and as they're both tapped completely out of energy, Subaru quietly clenched his chest as he sat next to her. Along with a sense of confirmation of Regulus' death, some mysterious thing slipped into the depths of his heart, carrying that burden alone. Much like when Betelgeuse was killed, it's very likely that Subaru has now acquired the greed factor. That will be it for this episode, but this was one a lot of people were excited for. What did you think? Best of the season? Overrated? Let me know in the comments below. Only 4 episodes of the season left, and let's hope Core 2 can keep going with its momentum here in the second half of the Core. And just to let you guys know, I will also be streaming the Anime Japan 2025 panel in March. I think it's in late March, around March 22nd, where we can probably expect a Season 4 announcement, but I do not know that for sure. Until next time. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe for more. You can also check the description down below to become a member, which gives you benefits like early videos, membership badges, and cool custom emotes. You can join the Discord where we talk about ReZero, Kagurabachi, Jujutsu Kaisen, and all kind of stuff. Additionally, you can go to the channel store and pick up some awesome stickers made by our channel artist, so you can carry the power of Graphia with you on your water bottle. That's about it though. Thank you for watching. See ya.